All right, Dr. Ted, welcome back on the show. So good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. It seems that you never learned your lesson the first time, did you?
Oh, I can't get enough of you, Dr. Ted. Don't be silly.
Oh, thank you.
So we're going to have a fun one today, and we're going to talk all about health optimization, medicine, and practice. And we've talked a bit about it before, but we dive in and then we dive out. But we really want to sort of systemize going through and getting people really informed about what this actual specialty practice is. So let's start right from the top and give us all a bit of a history on how health optimization medicine practice came about.
Okay, that's actually quite funny because I am a, what do you call it, Jodi? A supplement whore. I love supplements. I look at all of them, all the new ones, like, oh, what can they do for me? What can they do for me? And then I realized I was getting more and more irritated at the fact that I didn't have a framework by which to hang all of these supplements. Like, do I need this? Do I need that? All these new studies coming out. How do I differentiate those that are actually needed by my body or those that are actually created by my body and that I lacked? Right? Those that can be supplied naturally or those that I have to use drugs for. And with my increasing frustration, I said, there has to be a way to create a framework for doing this. And then I took a look at the definition of the World Health Organization of what health was. And I said, this fucking thing doesn't say how to do health clinically. You know, it's just a statement that this is it. It's like, so how the fuck do you get healthy, right? So I created a definition, which is very easy. And I say this over and over. So health is equal to A plus B plus C, right? So health is equal to A, the absence of disease, plus B, the balance between the anabolic processes or processes that build and catabolic processes or processes that destroy, according to C, the life cycle of an organism. So now you see immediately that this is a clinical definition, right? So absence of disease is the purview of illness medicine. And as you know, that I am an illness medicine doctor many times over. And it took me 3 years to actually get over the mentality that health is just the absence of disease. That's why I always say being healthy is not just about being sick. Right? So if you're not sick, it only means that you're not sick. It doesn't mean that you're healthy.
Exactly.
Right? So the A is actually taken care of by illness medicine, and the B plus C is, you know, the balance between anabolic and catabolic processes according to the cycle of life of the organism is actually health optimization medicine, right? So we are not after disease. Right? We are after the balance of the process that actually builds or destroys. For example, in children who are growing up, then you have more anabolic processes growing, right? In older people, you have more catabolic processes going. So the healthy portion is right there at the middle. So it's all about balance, right? So then I said, so what exactly do we balance? You know, what the fuck is that? You know, what is that? What is that balancing all about? And so I took a look, and actually there's a new science that has been around, new because it's only reached the clinics like in the past decade, but it's called clinical metabolomics, right? Turns out that the cell churns out these molecules inside it that can be measured. So it was not possible for us to peer inside cells before, but now we have the technology and it's now reached the clinics, right? So like anything new, there will be an initial resistance to do it, and there will be an initial expense to it. But as I say, you know, when the MRI first came out, it was $4,000 a pop and everyone was still using it. And now it's just like $400 a pop. And that's what happens when it's adopted. So the body, you know, you've heard of the term genome, right? So that's genes, right? And then there's the proteome, which is the enzymes in the body, right? And then you see now that there is what's called a metabolome, or the products of the working of the cell inside the cell, right? So the genome can only tell you, what can happen, right?
Mm.
And the proteome is telling you what can happen in the process, right? And the uh, metabolome will actually show you exactly what's happening now. So it's clinically actionable. That's why I said, health optimization is a clinical practice. We're not some highfalutin concept, right? That's doing that. So uh, the genome is what makes it happen. The proteome is what makes it happen. The genome shows what can happen. The proteome shows what makes it happen, and the metabolome shows what is happening now. So what's important to a clinician like me is what's happening to my patient or what's happening to my client, right?
Yeah.
And it turns out that these metabolites are actually, what are they? They are the vitamins, minerals, that are your body is using in normal communication. They are, all the plastics that you have ingested and is showing there, the pollution from the traffic that shows up in your blood and inside your cells. All of those can be measured. And of course, for those who are experts in nutrition out there, you can now measure the amount of essential amino acids that are in your client or in your patient. You can measure the amount of what percentage of the carbohydrates is actually getting turned into energy, right? And you could see now, before, when we were studying biochemistry, it was just like, yeah, memorize everything. But now we're fucked, right? Because we now are able to measure each and every metabolite in the anaplerotic reaction of the Krebs cycle. And so that's why a lot of physicians hate us, because now it's like, no, we don't do guesswork anymore. And that's another point, right? That I used to say. It's like, before we say, oh, I'm being asked by my patients all the time, like, doctor, is vitamin E good for me? Is vitamin C good for me? And I go, what the fuck? You can measure these things now. Just measure their levels, and if you need them, give them. If you don't need them, don't give them. So the era of guessing, right, about whether or not it's good for you is over. It's been way over, but people are just still catching up to the fact that all of these things that used to be not measurable, right, is now measurable. And the prices are coming down in terms of the testing. So these are the things that you balance. So I call it, you essentially balance the borderline deficiencies and subtle toxicities, right? So if you're severely deficient, then that goes to illness medicine, right? Like, for example, if you lack vitamin D and you get into nutritional osteomalacia, that is a medical treatment. But if your vitamin D level is not within an optimal range, which is evolutionarily derived, right? So there are values in the body that are derived from the values of men and women between 21 and 30 years old, which is the optimal level, right? And there are those that are evolutionarily derived, like, for example, vitamin D, which is derived from the Hadzabe and Maasai tribes in Africa, right? Because very little existence of chronic diseases. So you could see that the values to make you have no disease, right, are different from the values that are optimal. So when a patient or a client comes to me and said, oh, doctor, but my thyroid levels are normal. It's like, it's just normal enough not to make you hypothyroid, right? But it's not optimal for your functioning. So those are two different sets. And that's where we push the values of the metabolites up or down. The big part of it really, and the scary part now, especially with all the pollution, is that I have had a lot of patients or clients with mercury toxicity or cadmium toxicity. And in fact, one of the funniest that I had that was very serious, right, was a doctor himself who was eating canned goods all his life. he didn't eat anything fresh. He just liked everything in cans. And guess what? His tin levels, even if tin is already prohibited, right? In packaging, his tin levels were very high. So it's not enough, right? These are not enough to give you overt disease, but once they push to a certain level, right? Then they will show the overt disease, right? So it is your responsibility now as a health optimization practitioner, right? Or what I call health optimization specialist, right? To actually bring down those levels back to optimal. So you could see these things already coming way before the toxicity happens, right?
Yep.
And even in aging, a big issue, right? I started as an expert in anti-aging medicine, hormone balancing and stuff. But the big issue in aging is that everyone is now looking at this newfangled, you hear them, they're like very fancy, senolytics and all of these big words that you hear. But if you take a look at the progress of aging, you have like metabolic health, right? And then you sustain damage, right? And then it becomes chronic disease, right? And a very clear example of that is diabetes, right? So you start with, very high blood sugars, and usually, and this is a very sad indictment. I live here in the United States, right? Of the American society, where a large percentage of the children here are diabetic simply from malnutrition. Right? Most people think that malnutrition is a big thing. No. It's basically the wrong nutrition because of high intake of refined carbohydrates, which can be which is very much treatable by lifestyle changes and education on what foods are to eat. Right? And then all of those will, of course, get into complications like kidney failure and all of the things that you get with diabetes. As a side note, when you guys hear the word T3D or type 3 diabetes, it's actually Alzheimer's disease. So you could see the role also of sugars, right, in this thing. So these are the things that you progress from health, metabolic health, into damage, right? And then you get into disease. So what the world is focused on now again is damage, because it's sexy. Stem cell therapy, drug therapy to remove all those dead cells that produce poisons in your body. And it makes a lot of money, right? Because it's like it's an incredible. I follow the work because it's an incredible area, right? That you take a look. This is the way it's already damaged, and therefore this is what you call the repair mechanism, right? So, but we, they're in the repair business, but we are on the maintenance side. So no one's paying attention to metabolic health, right? So health optimization is actually the one that takes care of the metabolic health. I mean, why go into the damage very quickly, right? As you get older, there's more damage, right? Can you stave off that damage, right? So you can save off the damage by taking care of metabolic health. But the big question is how? We're a clinical practice. How the fuck do you do something like that? The World Health has no specification on how you actually clinically, maintain health. And even in medical school, we're taught what's not sick, but we're not taught what's healthy, right? They just say it's normal. So what's normal is not sick, right? We never have, yeah. we absolutely have no idea. It's like not really knowing. You already know that how to diagnose a flat tire. You don't even know what the normal tire pressure is. So it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's a simple analogy actually to what health optimization is, right? It's like a car dashboard analogy that I give. Before, our dashboards were very simple, right? You could just see certain, your fuel gauge, how much fuel you have, how much oil you had in your car. These are the old analog gauges. But now you have your digital gauges that shows you how much your tire pressure is per tire, right? Whether or not your windshield wiper fluid is down, right? How much you have to put in, what the temperature of your car is, etc. That is like that detecting the metabolites or the status of metabolites. Your car is still running fine, meaning it's not sick, right? But you know it actually needs all of these things. So I say if your windshield wiper fluid is low, that's probably equivalent to finding out in your metabolomics test that your alpha lipoic acid level is low, right? And then the pushback to me over this is like, well, why can't they just eat, more nutrients containing alpha lipoic acid? And I shoot back and I say, hey, give me some foods that are high in alpha lipoic acid, right? And crickets. There's no answer coming back. I said, see, you like saying these things, throwing these things back to me, but you yourself don't know, right? And a challenge that I actually do because I do recommend, for example, walking 2 miles a day nonstop, right? And one of the things that I do for these very wealthy patients that I have is, they don't want to walk, right? They want to sweat and all of that. And I tell them to walk continuously around the shopping mall, but don't buy that. But don't buy anything. And if you do, carry your own bags, right? So that there's a muscular tension that's formed against the bone, right? So they retain bone density, because lack of bone density is one of those things that you have to deal with older age. It's like, don't let your chauffeur carry all your boxes for you, carry them yourself. So, but anyway, for me, it's like we didn't have a framework of how to actually maintain health, right? So we didn't have a how to judge what's healthy in an objective way, and now we have clinical metabolomics to do it, right? And we didn't know an objective measure of what's healthy, and now you could see when you move the levels back, say, of alpha lipoic acid, of their amino acids or essential amino acids, through supplementing them with actual amino acids, or my favorite thing, making them eat steak as rare as they can twice a week, right? Fuck the vegetarians is what I say. It's you're in Australia, hey, it's like best steaks ever, right? But for me, it's like that's the fastest way to get these things back, right? So when I got into the definition of health and got into what is it exactly that we balance, right? So we balance the metabolite levels, right? We balance the subtle toxicities and borderline deficiencies. You're not overtly sick, right? And then bring them back to the ages 21 and 30, or to evolutionarily derived levels. And then that now has become a framework of everything that we do, right? So that's metabolomics, and you're a practitioner of health optimization, Jodi. You've been doing so for a number of years, and you could see that one of the areas that we're big at is, for example, the mitochondria, right? Because the mitochondria throws off all of these metabolites that can be measured, used to be memorized, but now measured. And then now you could supply, those metabolites back. And we're not interested in the PhD type of information that can be given to us, either, how long does the DNA unwind? That's, fuck those questions. We're interested in, okay, how much, vitamin B1, how much thiamine do we need, right? In order to get the whole reaction going. So suddenly you're focused on the vitamins and minerals and toxins that could affect the entire Krebs cycle, right? And then in the anaerobic portion, when the glucose is being divided, it needs NAD, right? So immediately you could see all of these requirements, and all of these requirements can now be measured. You don't need to guess what those vitamins are and how much you need to give, because they are now available to you, right? So when a person is feeling weak, right, for no reason at all, and has been being weak for a long time, most of the time you don't know what to do, right? Because it's not a disease, they just feel weak, right? But if you take a look at the vitamin B1 levels, it's very low, or their B levels in general, because B are energy vitamins. So supply them with this, and you know exactly how to give, because it's you actually see where the levels are. So then you have a mechanism by which you can always push, a client or a patient back to balance. And I call health optimization patients clients because they're not sick, right? They may have other diseases, but when they come to us, we leave the diagnosis with their illness medicine doctors. We are in communication with their doctors, right? This is what we're doing. But usually when you're being balanced, then the management of your disease becomes easier, right? In fact, I have situations where I have to call the cardiologist and say, hey, you're giving this dose, and we've done this health optimization of the metabolites, right, of the patient, and I think you need to cut the dose. But I leave them to do the dose cutting, because the patient may be going into postural hypotension, meaning they get dizzy when standing up, etc., meaning the blood pressure med is already too high. Yeah. Right. So that's one, is in bioenergetics, giving you energy. And the other big area, which has been the subject of much research and much media coverage, is of course the gut microbiota, right? There's microbiota all over your body, but of course, the one that acts like a major organ will be the ones in the gut, right? And the gut microbiota are about 2 kilos, right? That's a big weight, right? And you poop about half of them every day, if you poop every day, and they get replenished, right? They produce a lot of metabolites, and they act as a separate organ. The way health optimization medicine does this is by regarding it as an organ in itself, right? So it produces its own metabolites. You can measure them. You could see whether it's an ecosystem in itself. You could see whether or not there's an overgrowth, say, of candida, or yeast. You could see overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria, or those that can potentially cause disease. So you could see all of these organisms in there, and you can also see your intestinal lining, right? I'd like your listeners to remember this. Your intestinal lining is actually just like a reverse skin, right? Yeah. So you have to be careful what you put on your skin. You're careful also what you swallow, right? For me, they're the same. They absorb the same things. So, and that lining, you can also detect the health through the metabolites they produce, right? So, for example, in the colon, where your poop is stored and where much of water is actually reabsorbed back, right? The bacteria in there are the only places, that is the only place in the body where vitamin B12 is produced. You can't produce it anywhere else. And as you get older, right, you need to take vitamin B12 sublingually because your stomach cannot activate it anymore, right? So there are reasons why it's sublingual and it's oral, etc. But when you're healthy, you know that it comes from your colonic bacteria, right? Your colonic bacteria also is responsible for production of much of butyrate. And what is butyrate? Butyrate is the primary energy source of the colon cells. And if you take a look at the illness medicine studies now, low butyrate levels are associated with high rates of colon cancer. So see, you can, as a health optimization expert or health optimization specialist, take a look at butyrate levels like, hey, we have to increase your butyrate levels now to optimal levels. And there are ways of doing that. One, of course, of the fastest ways is like, hey, okay, take butyrate itself, right? So that will open up in the colon and that's it. It's pretty good, right? But of course, one of the best ways to do it is to have a high fiber diet, right? As I like to say, the fastest disappearing macronutrient in humans is fiber. We all need around 34 grams of fiber a day, right? And so because they form the scaffolding for the bacteria, right? They also form the scaffolding for your poop, right? And so it has all these functions. And as you can see, we're treating the bacteria, as one organ in itself. And health optimization medicine doesn't look at organs, right? We look at cells. So let me introduce a term here. We look at the body as an ecosystem of cells, and therefore that is called a holobiont.
Yes,
a holobiont, right?
I love that so much.
And so see, there's a difference between, why don't you call it a superorganism then? Because it's made up of cells. A superorganism would be one that is just made up of one type of cell, right? But we are made up of different types of cells. For example, the mitochondria, as I mentioned earlier, which is in bioenergetics, that produces the energy of the body, comes from bacteria, right? They're independent bacteria that are swimming there inside your cells. So, and they divide like bacteria, etc. So you think you own them, but they actually are their own bacteria, right? So much so, like your gut bacteria, right? And then your nucleus cytosol, or the one that hosts them, right? Your mitochondria inside the cell, there's a nucleus, a cytoplasm, cell membrane. That is an anaerobic organism, meaning it produces energy without oxygen, right? So the mitochondria produces energy with oxygen. So you could see that we are actually an aggregation of all of these bacteria that are all coordinated, right? So when you go to an illness medicine physician, especially to, I used to do minimally invasive neurosurgery. So when you are able to take a look at the patient, you basically all relate it to the organ that you are specialized in. But for us, we look at the basic cell, right, which forms the base of all the organs, and all the tissues, all the organs in the body are made up of the exact basic cell, right? It's a nucleus, cytoplasm, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, cell membranes, cytosolic water, etc., etc. So when you look at that, and even red blood cells, right? They initially have mitochondria, and then the mitochondria donate their iron to become heme in the blood. So once upon a time, your red blood cells also had mitochondria. So it's the same basic thing. So why is it that no one is taking care of the basic cell, right? When it's the foundation of everything else.
It's so
right?
simple. But when you tell people, and when you say and explain this in this way, there's still no understanding. People don't understand the fact that we're actually optimizing that basic cell and optimizing, therefore, the whole organism, that holobiont.
Yes, and understanding that we're an ecosystem of cells, right? So, and that's a big picture that you just actually said. If I were an illness medicine doctor, once upon a time I was, then you see that we see the individual, right? The individual in a population. That is the unit of selection, right? It's like, so when you're testing a particular drug, for example, it has to work across your population of individuals, right? But here we cannot do that, because each and every person will have a different level, baseline level, or core level of metabolome of metabolites in their metabolome. So each one will have a different set of values, and therefore we are actually not quantitative but qualitative when we do an assessment of health, right? Because all of this, what we do have is an objective measure of the health. Right? And then when you see that the values are improving, you actually also hear the patient saying, I feel so much better, I have more energy, and so on. So in other words, we set aside all our preconceptions of what it is and just simply provide the cell what it needs in order to survive and thrive, right?
Yeah.
So that's we discussed metabolomics, we discussed bioenergetics, we discussed mitochondria, and as I said here, we are at the basic cell level, right? So at the basic cell level, it turns out, only has a fixed number of ways to deal with stress, right? It only has, it's evolutionarily defined. This is how we deal with stress. So every time it's stressed out, you give the signal, it will do the same things over and over.
Yeah.
And that was actually essayed in a paper, and that's called the cell danger response, right? So what drives the cell danger response really is your level of metabolites, right? So again, we're testing the metabolites here, and to see whether or not your cell danger response is actually turned on or off. Because when the body is actually designed for stress, right?
Yeah.
And when it's stressed out, it will actually turn on all the mechanisms that will resolve that stress, right? Or injury, or cellular injury. And then after that, with the expectation that the stressor stops, right? If the stressor doesn't stop, then you get a fucking divorce, correct? So otherwise, it's going to be a chronic process, and that's how chronic disease starts, right? And you'll be sniping at each other in front of your kids. So, and the kids grow up fucked up. So anyway, anyway, the point here is that you want to be able to support the faster resolution of the cell danger response, right? And that is contained in a field called evolutionary medicine, right? Evolutionary medicine asks the question, why do we get sick, right? But we at Health Optimization have a clinical definition of evolutionary medicine. We ask the question, how do we get healthy? What the fuck? Why do you have to ask, why do you get sick? You ask that question only if you are sick, right? But here it's like, okay, how do you get healthy? You don't even know how do you get healthy, you're already asking how do you get sick, right? It's kind of backwards. But we do understand that that's really the case, because there was no technology yet before in order to do this. But now we do, right? We have an advanced dashboard, the Health Optimization dashboard, that's full of the levels of the metabolites in the body. So now you have evolutionary medicine, which used to be just really a PhD topic, and we've converted it in Health Optimization medicine to be a clinical topic. It's something that you actually do and balance within the body. Now, related to that is the field called exposomics. And this may be a new term for many people out there, but exposomics is very simple. It's the sum total of your exposures to everything since you were born, right? Or since you were conceived. So it includes, like, if the mother was drinking during pregnancy, so like a fetal alcohol syndrome, that's exposure to alcohol, right? Your exposure to X-rays, your exposure to cigarette smoke, your exposure to toxic relationships, all of those actually contribute to what's called an exposome. So you have a genome, proteome, metabolome, exposome, right? And the shorthand for remembering what an exposome is it's your environmental genome, right? It's your environmental genome. So the environmental genome, another simple way of remembering it, like what poisons are around, right? Did he give the kids allowances today? Anyway, but
But it's so important to think about this, because in clinical practice, when you're in front of a person, it's so important to understand that whole environmental exposure, not just what they're exposed to right now in this particular time, but for the history of how or where they've been around, and their exposures according to family members, and you say like relationships, emotions, and therefore coming from the inside and outside. And we adapt differently. And our evolution has been not as fast. I always say to my clients, I'm like, well, why do we react to these exposures of toxins now? Well, because we haven't evolved as quickly, and the evolution of what time we've been on Earth compared to the kind of toxins that we've been exposed to and how quickly they've come up has been so much more dramatic than the time that we've been able to adapt to that. So
in fact, Jodi, what you're saying is that it is actually quite scary when people realize that, when they did a study of males in Europe ages 21 to 30, we saw actually a drop in testosterone, comparable to those already in their 50s or 60s. That is very scary. And the reason for it is because of EDCs, or endocrine disrupting chemicals, right? So these plastics, these microplastics, and so on, the phthalates, and all of those actually affect you, and you don't know it. That's why. But what was frustrating about the original exposome as a subject matter, again, is a PhD course, right? We made it clinical, like how do you deal with the exposome, right? You're not yet in any acute danger of toxicity, but you already know that it's climbing and you have to bring it down, right? Exactly. So what is annoying about that is that they made the genes the unit of selection about which the environment is formed. So it means that even the cell is an exposome of the gene. So what we did in health optimization medicine is made the cell the main unit of the exposome, right? So that is what is affected, what affects it, right, around it. And in a macro level, right, it's easy to conceive of it as the context by which the organism is actually surviving and thriving, right? So because we are not actually separate from environment, right? As I has been essayed many times in the past, and I like to say it, we are physically closed systems, but we are energetically open, right? We are not, separate from our environment. No matter how much we think so, we and our environment are one and the same, right? So, I'd like to caution people here in terms of, like, you love to eat fish, you love to eat all salmon, all of this stuff. At this time, I've been having many cases where the mercury levels are just steadily rising, and you have to address that before they get into a full-blown subchronic toxicity that suddenly becomes acute in presentation. They get brought to the hospital, right? And one of my loveliest cases around is that I had a case like that, and each illness medicine doctor had a diagnosis, right? The cardiologist had a diagnosis of arrhythmia, the dermatologist had dermatitis, the nephrologist had a different diagnosis, the two neurologists have different diagnosis for the severe muscle weakness, right? So all of them, and no one actually acknowledged the fact that this was actually stemming from mercury toxicity. You see, and that's how important it is to do health optimization, right? Note, we are not talking about disease, and that's how we differentiate ourselves really from practices like functional medicine. Functional medicine, they say, after the root causes of disease. No, we're after the root cause of health. And what is that? There's really only one root cause of health. It's very easy to remember, right? It's the balance between the anabolic and catabolic processes according to the cycle of life of the organism. If you remember that, and that you're supposed to balance the metabolites, you'll get it mostly right, right? There are a lot of nuances in the practice, right? Especially if the patient or client has additional diseases. But that once you address the fundamental needs of the cell, you're mostly going to be all right, right? So I mentioned here, right, that the context or the environment is actually very important, right? And I will move now to the context of environment of your day-night cycle, right? I used to be, and it's called chronobiology, right? So your environment where you have bright lights at night and so on and so forth, that totally fucks up your melatonin system and all of that. And I used to be very guilty before COVID happened that I defined heaven as, being in one time zone for more than 2 weeks, because I was rarely in the same time zone for 2 weeks because I had international clients and patients. But you could see actually now chronobiology is balancing now, right? Your day-night cycles. And you could see that very quickly. For example, if you take a look at what's called inflammatory cytokines of a patient, right? And those are metabolites too. And these are, they will signify either inflammation or anti-inflammatory cytokines. They're molecules that do that, right? And you could see that the more sleep deprived you are, and so on, is the more you have these inflammatory cytokines going, right? What do? They induce inflammation. And one of the most common mechanisms that happens is what's called oxidation, right? And oxidation, you can think of that as rusting, as in rusting of a tailpipe, or rusting of metal. And those have to be scraped out, right? You need to have antioxidants to put in there, but you can't throw a whole barrel of antioxidants in there, because that there is also a syndrome called antioxidant induced stress, meaning there's just too many antioxidants, right? Yeah. So then you have to measure, right? You have to measure those. So we have the beauty of the specialty, and why we are clinical specialty. We have an objective measure that comes with metabolomics, and we have an objective measure of the progress, right? And the patient having the subjective report of the experience. It usually takes around 3 months, 3 to 4 months, to feel a certain wellness inside. And my clients usually go, the husband usually go, oh, my wife just sent me here. I'm really okay. I feel fine, right? And I said, oh, okay, let's be kind to your wife, and let's do this, because the one word that practitioners should remember about this, there's a reason why it's a difficult concept to put out there. This is highly experiential, right? When you feel it. So they come back 6 months later and they go, oh my God, Dr. Ted, I never thought it was possible to feel this way. They were feeling okay before. And now that they know where their balance is, right? When they get thrown out of kilter, when they thrown out of balance, they know immediately how to get back into balance. Or as a consequence of health optimization, they balance or they bounce back quickly to health. Absolutely. Right? So
I see this time again. The last few years, I see it all. And the amount of time people have come in here and told me after doing this work, saying, I cannot believe I've been feeling this way for this long without knowing what it feels like to be well, to be healthy. And now I know. And they'll come back in and they'll say, look, just feel a little bit out of balance, just need to tweak something again. Bring them back in. We tweak something, we add in something, and they're like, right, yep, I'm good now. And it didn't take that long at all. It's just so true.
Yeah. But the thing is, illness medicine has given us like silver bullets, right? Antibiotics for infections. So people like instant gratification. So what I tell my patients or my clients is that, it took you 40 years to reach this state. Why do you want this to, resolve overnight? It can't, you punished your body for this long, right?
Oh, and we also had to... A month for every year that you were feeling like crap.
Yeah. And it also takes, a lot of education and patience that is going to come, but the patients get impatient. About this because they're so used to instant gratification. But when they realize, like, well, it actually took me 9 months to get this fat, right? So again, just as a side note on fat, because I know that weight is a big issue for many people. Health optimization doesn't do weight loss, right? We do fat loss because muscle is important for the body. Right? So we are not weight loss people, we're fat loss people, especially visceral fat, which is fat wrapped around your intestines. That is the one that's actually a great prognosticator of being unwell or being sick, right? How much visceral fat you have. And there are now monitors that monitor your skeletal muscle mass, your visceral fat, your cutaneous fat, all of those machines now actually exist. So no excuse not to see all of
Absolutely.
those things. To your point, actually, it's very interesting. The first time I got my I had a food sensitivity testing, right?
Mm.
And I was eating, eggs every day like crazy, right? It's like it was my go-to every time. And then I saw it, I was severely sensitive to it. And and I don't say don't eat those eggs forever, right? I said just stay away from them for at least 6 months, right? And then slowly reintroduce them,
Mm.
and about twice a week, with a distance about 4 days, and you'd be okay,
Mm.
right? I now I'm able to eat eggs at least once a week, right? But before, it's like when I totally stopped it, like holy shit, I was my waist reduced in size to by 2 inches, right?
Mm.
Like in a matter of 2 weeks. And that's because the inflammation and the bloating just went down and went away. So there are all of these things that we don't really appreciate until we get the results, right? Especially, for example, in the gut, we now know that the gut is the biggest immune organ in the body. It used to be the bone marrow when we were in medical school. Now we know it's actually the gut that teaches your immune system, right? The huge part of your immune system is actually educated by gut and back by gut bacteria, the food that you eat, how antigenic they are, or how sensitive you are in terms of being able to take them in. And of course, if your gut lining is leaky, what they call leaky gut, right? If you could see that too, and you could see all of this different, what they call endotoxins, right? These molecules that are not supposed to be in your body coming in, and your body forming an immune reaction against them, right? So you have all of this inflammation coming up. So even in cases, for example, like that are well-known autoimmune cases, right? Yeah, diseases that are well-known autoimmune diseases. One of the things that I do when the immunologist refers to me is I take a look at the sensitivities of the person, because it does help decrease the immune response, right? Because it's a hyper response, right? When you get an autoimmune disease.
Yes.
So I take a look how else can we cool down this hyperreactive immune system? And if you're able to take that out, you already would have helped, the patient or your client a lot, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so there is actually an exciting area that we haven't talked about yet, Jodi, which is epigenetics, right? And it's very new. It's also a fantastic measure of age. And the way I explain it is like epigenetics is like as you get older, you get plaque on your teeth, and the plaque that doesn't get scaled, or you have to brush it off and or scale it. The dentist has to scale it out, right? But there are now measures of how heavily plaque ridden you are, and this is your genes, right? In your genes, they have a wrapper around them called chromatin. And there are sites within those within that histone cover that's in there, where certain molecules can attach, right? And what they do is they can either silence a gene, right, or they can activate a gene. So, for example, you guys know of the famous case, right? Where because the breast cancer gene was present in both breasts, this famous person elected to do a bilateral mastectomy. But if you're living a healthy life, right, and you have an epigenetics test that actually shows that you're actually younger than your age, meaning you have less plaque in those areas, because those things can actually silence your cancer genes, and these are heritable. It can be inherited. So these are non-genetic mechanisms that can be inherited by your child. Right? For example, if you smoke, the changes in your epigenome can be inherited by your child and can be inherited by your grandchild, right? Via the germline or via your eggs, right? So you could see how epigenetics affects 3 generations right away, just by smoking, right? So you see, those are the effects in the body. one of the best ways that I have convinced people to exercise is actually showing them the relationship, like, oh, the stress, exercise, etc. They all affect your epigenome, your diet, and everything else. They all affect your epigenome, right? And so it contributes. So that's why, you know, exercise at an optimal amount is actually keeps you younger. Any more, it will overtax you, right? And any less, it says not too much, right? Um, and the whole thing about you know, movement, which is very interesting when you ask illness medicine doctors, they prescribe their patients, oh, you just do some exercise. And I challenged them. I said, come on, bring your patient to the gym and teach him how to exercise. What should he do? Right? Because the trainer will only respond really to what he knows, right? Which is a normal person who is healthy and, you know, training. But what if this is your patient, right? You would know what to prescribe. Yeah. So even myself, you know, I and people know this, I bring my patients or my clients to the gym and teach them how to exercise themselves.
It's
right?
so important.
So it's everything. So as you can see, the practice itself already affects behavior. So fuck lifestyle medicine. It all comes from the framework, right? You take a look at the metabolites that affect the chronobiology of the person, and then now you actually affect the lifestyle sleep. You take a look at the nutrients that affect energy, that affect the gut microbiota. You know, you take a look at the toxins, etc. Now you can change the behavior by saying, okay, don't heat your food in plastics. Don't, this is the level of B vitamins that you need to be taking every day, and so on and so forth. So see, the hardest things, as you know this, you see clients every time, is behavioral change, right? So I don't, from this is coming from experience, of over a decade, is saying, you tell your patient to change lifestyle, it doesn't stick, right? So you have to go for the jugular first, and then when they see the good effects of it on their wellness, then everything snowballs. An example for this that I give is when you tell your patient, oh, doctor, I don't want to take these vitamins. I'm just gonna eat it. I said, okay. I tell them, give me your chef and I will tell your chef what to prepare. Right? Because they won't really eat. So what I do is like, okay, what can you commit to me? Can you commit to me a time for eating? So why don't we narrow down your feeding window to, from the current feeding window of 16 hours, you can eat anything. Let's narrow it down to 14 hours and 12 hours and 10 hours and 8 hours, and I tell them, eat anything with those 8 hours. I don't give a flying fuck what you eat at the time, right? When you get used to eating there, then they say, oh my God, this feels so good. What else can I do? And then that's when they change their habit, right? So you have to go at the point really where the patient is comfortable in meeting you, right? Otherwise, you will not get any behavioral change. Right? So, you tell a teenager, go sleep at 10 p.m. No, it's more like a 4 p.m. thing, right? and as you know, we raise our kids to be prolonged adolescents, right? They stay in the house until 30, so they still behave like adolescents at the time. So it can be kind of frustrating to deal with lifestyle and behavior, and it's really naive to say that you can actually do this just by lifestyle alone. You can't, right? You have to put in the base of the objective measurement of the deficiencies and borderline deficiencies, subtle toxicities, present the improvements that are going, right? And then that actually pushes the patient or the client to behave, to adopt more healthy lifestyle behaviors, because they see like, okay, I love eating this fish, and it turns out that's full of mercury, right? So there's a behavioral change that immediately happens, right? Or I like eating refined carbohydrates, and they see how their the carbohydrate metabolism looks like, or even just their fasting insulin and fasting blood sugar. When you take them, you can change those right away, right? First, by giving them supplements to do that, and when they get to the point where you're not pre-diabetic anymore, right? So and then now you say, okay, maybe we could try a higher fiber diet, right? We could try to move a little bit more, right? Uh, One of the interesting things, what cases that I had is like, I had a powerful woman, a smoker, right? In charge of bank and stuff like that, and despite all her deficiencies, she was in fantastic shape. And I found out that at lunchtime she would go out at noon, right? And she only smoked like 3 to 6 cigarettes, 6 of cigarettes a day, but still it's a bad habit, right? So she would actually smoke, but instead of just smoking outside, she would walk around the block, so of her building, exposing her to sunlight. And she had one of the highest vitamin D levels that I actually saw. And with just that one measure alone, you could see that this is another concept that we have in health optimization. We balance the network. We don't just balance one, right? We balance one metabolite, we balance the network. So I disagree, for example, with a single testosterone therapy. You can't do that, right? You have to take a look at the entire network, because when you touch one node in the network, everything else will move. And that is the art of the practice, right? There is still the art of the practice, because here, when you have a client or a patient, the client or the patient becomes your lifelong friend, right? Because you get to know, how their relationships are, you get to know how their work is, and so on. Because after the initial part of being highly objective about it, you try to coax them now into lifestyle changes. Lifestyle changes cannot be slapped onto a person. No. Right? That's why, I know people will hate me for saying this. You cannot have lifestyle medicine without having health optimization first, right? You have to do health optimization medicine or health optimization practice first. See, I just like to clarify here, health optimization medicine is for physicians. Health optimization practice is for non-physician healthcare practitioners. The only difference that they have really is being able to prescribe drugs. However, we do have a level, 3 different ways, and they of what you do first to give a patient or client. The first thing you do is what's called the bioidenticals, what the body really needs, right, or uses in its regular workings. An example for this is, for example, methyl tetrahydrofolate, right? Or the motherfucker vitamin. Sorry, this is kid safe. Methyl tetrahydrofolate.
Not on the radio.
Methyl tetrahydrofolate is actually the form that the body uses. It's not folic acid, right? Folic acid has to be cleaved in 2 steps to convert to methyl tetrahydrofolate. However, there are countries that actually enrich their rice with folic acid, right? And you don't know, there's a large percentage of people who actually have very sluggish genes that convert this. So you're wasting, millions of dollars enriching the rice, and actually, not all of the population, not even a substantial part of the population can benefit from it. So our first thing is really to see, what does the body use? And I call those bioidenticals, right? Or bioactives. It's in the exact form that goes into the reaction, right? Into the biochemical reaction. And then you have the phytoceuticals, berberine, your plant products, fungiceuticals, the mushrooms, etc. You have your a spore probiotics or your probiotics. These are live, right? And so on. And this is second line that you are providing to the patient. Another thing that's big actually in France are bacteriophages. These are actually viruses that attack pathogenic bacteria, right? So there's the second line. And the third line is only when things don't work, when you actually put in the drug. And the reason for that, and this is really funny because before, when I was starting this framework, it was more like, I get calls from physicians like, Dr. Ted, how is your vitamins, minerals, and supplements going to affect, my therapy? And I go, no, actually, you have this in the reverse. What you're giving the patient has never seen by evolution before. It's never seen by the body. So but what I'm giving the patient has been seen by the body in evolution before, and it knows how to use it. So you tell me how, your treatment of the patient is going to affect all of these levels. So you have this question backwards, exactly. Right?
Yeah. And
so
you see those declining levels over time with the pharmaceutical medications. And if you're not rebalancing, then you're getting damage and aging and disease.
Yes, exactly. I know that probably some of your listeners are, medicating with, say, finasteride, right, to prevent hair loss. And, certain famous people are known for using it, just to prevent losing hair. But, I even know some of my male patients, they come in with about 20 years of using this, in fact, right, without stopping. Right. And when you look at, if you look at their hormonal picture, it's all out of whack. And you're wondering, they're only this age, but why is this all out of whack? And, the simplest thing that I did, is a good thing that I'm trained in pharmacology. I took a look at what it actually does to the body. It's actually in their literature. It will affect the hormones this way. And it was exactly the same picture. And I said, I gotcha. And, you take it out, and in about 6 months, you replace it with something like a saw palmetto or something else that's more natural. And then the hormonal picture actually starts to straighten out. But the key here is that if you don't know that, if you don't realize that it's the drug that's actually doing that, you will start balancing everything else. It's like, oh, I'll give more this and I'll give more that, et cetera, without taking the actual, what they call, irritant to the whole picture, right? Cool. So, So what we talked about, those are the 7 pillars of health optimization medicine, right? So that's clinical metabolomics, there's bioenergetics, there's gut immune system, there's exposomics, there's chronobiology, there's evolutionary medicine, and there's epigenetics. You see, we cover all the bases for that. So, for example, there are times when you'll be seeing people saying, oh, I want to wear like amber glasses, 2 hours before sleep. So I will have no, or blue blocking glasses. So I'll have better sleep, and so on. And those belong to the biohacking crowd, right? Those are belong to biohacking community. We love them. They do what N equals 1, experimentations on themselves. They take, NAD, they take this, they take that. But in the end, health optimization medicine and practice, or HOMeHOPe, actually provides the framework where you can hang your biohacks. Like, oh, this hack is for chronobiology, and oh, this butyrate supplement, that's hack is for the gut immune system, right? Oh, this NAD, this hack is for the mitochondria, right? This alpha lipoic acid, this actually is a hack for and selenium, this is a hack for toxicity, right? So you could hang those in the various parts of the framework, and now you could have a clearer picture. If you want to help someone, then don't just hack, measure, right? And then balance, right? So it's really very easy, right? You measure measure the levels of metabolites. You balance them to the age when they were between 21 and 30 years old, or at evolutionarily derived values like vitamin D, right? And then the way you do this is by shifting the entire network, right? Not just a single node, but you shift the entire network down to that particular range, right? You follow the guidance to do it. It's an art in itself, right? Because certain people will have different responses. So when you see that certain values are already moving, right, then you know that you are in the right path. But then you see that you're overshooting in certain areas, and you can always balance them back. But the key part here is always monitoring how your patient is feeling, right? Because for example, in my experience with hormone balancing, for example, I've already moved them as close to, in the United States, you try them to move them to values as close to 30, right? We're scaredy cats here. In Paris, you try to move them as close to 25 as possible, right? But all the while, when you're moving that entire network of hormones, you are asking the patient, are you feeling well, right? And you stay there if the patient's already feeling optimal, even if the patient's only at the age 30.
Yeah.
Right? So these are the kinds of things that we do in health optimization medicine. Of course, there are other principles that we could talk about, but I know we need to make this fun, nothing serious. But so I just introduced three concepts. One, you already heard. I just introduced the concept of the holobiont, right? So our focus is not the organ. We're not into organs. We're into the actual holobiont, right? We're looking at network system of cells as an ecosystem, right? And then there is what I want to call metabolic neotenization, right? So a neoteny is a term that means making younger, right? Neotenized. And the way to remember this is when Mickey Mouse first came out in, I think, late 20s, he looked like a rat, right? It had a long snout, an adult, right? And he was not very lovable. But if you trace it over the years, he became a baby. The snout was pushed backwards, the eyes widened a lot, the chin was withdrawn, right? The nose became a button nose, the ears became bigger. And this was essayed in Stephen Jay Gould's essay about neotenization. So what we're doing here is metabolic neotenization, meaning we make your metabolites younger. We push them to a younger range, right? And the first one, which has already been mentioned before, right, in other disciplines, is what's called salutogenesis, or the root cause of health, right? So what is the root cause of health? And we've already identified it. It's not salutology. Salutology is a different study altogether, right? Salutology is a study of health in populations, and that's a purview of public health, right? So public health specialists, epidemiologists, etc., that is salutology. Salutogenesis is simply a principle of finding the root cause of health, right? Not the root cause of disease, but the root cause of health.
Yeah.
So those are the three principles that we look at. And as I say, we look at everything from different axes, the axis of the environment, for example, the time when we had no radio and any electromagnetic frequencies to now having 5G, right? We still don't know what the effects of those are, right? There may be none, there may be something, we don't know, but we're continuing to find out. But we definitely know that artificial light has fucked up our sleep, our chronobiology, right? We sought to tame the night, and here we are, totally sleepless, or totally irritable when we wake up in the morning because we haven't had enough sleep. So yeah, so that's the the environment, the environmental scale, right? And then you have the development of science, right? From the body to organs, and then to tissues, and then to cells. And the cells is where we are. So when you meet a health optimization practitioner, don't get confused, right? Because your illness medicine doctor will be looking at your organ. Oh, I'm a cardiologist, I look at the heart, right? We look at the cell, right? So that frame of reference is actually very important. That we are not here to compete, right? We are here to actually help with the health of the fundamental cell of the body and take care of it, right? And then, as you have mentioned, Jodi, we look at evolution. How did we evolve from single-cell organisms in the oceans to the current, to where we are right now? And this is where we take a look at the diets, right? So we know that our bodies are actually of a Paleolithic make and model. This is where we are, right? So that's why we know why a Paleolithic diet works, right? So it's not about a ketogenic diet. It's not about, all of these diets, but what is it that the make and model of if body is a car, right? What's the make and model? And we know that we are of the hunter-gatherer model, right? So we're used to actually hunting, gathering, moving, right? Hauling fruits and berries into our campsite, running after game. The males used to run after game. So I actually joke that they invented aerobics, and women actually invented weightlifting because they were carrying their babies, they were picking the fruit, they were putting in the sacks, putting it in their head, fetching water, all of those. So weightlifting was really initially a woman's game. Right? And running around, chasing after animals was actually the man's game, right? So can you imagine? If you were, the fad right now, or not a fad, but a practice that they do for runners, right? They carry heavy stuff, right? In the training of soldiers, they put in the heavy load and they start running uphill, etc., etc. That's just like, adding the female role to the male role of running up. Right? I'm sure many soldiers would hate to hear that, but evolutionary, that's where we are. So then you could see now the effect that it's like, well, what's the basis in lifestyle medicine? And this is why, for me, it's just like, it's like without this axis that you look at in health optimization, right? The three axes, the one is from the size, right? The size of what you're looking at down into the cell, from the evolution from single cell to that, you could see how we develop and where our bodies are at. So the diets are examined right there. I like to say that agriculture and animal husbandry are the two watershed events that affected our health, right? Because we were so insecure about our food supply, right? We then had to invent agriculture. And what did we get? We started to live together in small communities. We started to have problems of sanitation. We began to have infectious diseases. We started to encroach on jungles and forests. We now have malaria, and the other things that used to be kept by these forests, because we were slash and burn agricultural peoples, right? So all of this came about because of that practice. And then we had problems on the storage of grain, right? Now we have all of these issues of infection of grain with mold, right? So all of this came about. So what we did do with animal husbandry? Now, what happened then is that we began to tame and domesticate animals, right? And therefore, their fat content kept getting larger and larger. The muscle content, the lean part got less and less. And of course, we're evolutionarily wired to seek out high calorie dense food, and therefore we prefer fat, right? And so now we started to grow sweeter and sweeter apples, right, with more and more sugar content. Now we're just really titillating our senses, but that's the addiction of evolution, right? Because we are, I have a dear friend who likes to say the only reason why we move is to find a an energy source, right? Is to find food, right? Is to find food. So you could see immediately that just by looking at these three axes of the size and complexity of the organism, the evolution of organism, and the evolution of the environment and our chronobiology, you could see the entire picture by looking at XYZ axis that you actually have that.
Yeah.
So you see here clearly that we are really right at the root, right, of health. And then from there, everything else would spring up.
And also
so,
with that fundamental aspect of what we're talking about with health optimization, medicine and practice, I like to say this because I compare this to my clients when I say that we need to go and do, hyperbaric chambers, we need to go and do red light therapy, we need to go and do extra treatments or technologies on top of that. But for enabling those to be optimally working, it's requirement that we have those fundamentals there to get the best out of those technologies. So that's the first step in all,
Yeah.
look at that first, and then we can get the most out. Otherwise, you're just not going to get to where you need to with those technologies. And a lot of the time you're wasting, they can assist along the way, but you're wasting, your time, money before you get those fundamentals right.
Exactly. And, you and I both know our dear friend, Scott Scher, who is was one of the world's experts in hyperbaric therapy. And, one statement of mine actually sort of like poked him and punched him in the gut. I said, hyperbaric therapy is just really maintaining redox balance.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, that's what I'm doing, right? This is just redox balance. So again, it's a balancing act, right? That you're doing right there. And you see all of these things are actually, you have the fundamental health optimization, and then you have all of these other things that you could do, right? In order to further balance the system,
exactly.
Right? For example, before to prepare a patient for hyperbaric therapy, especially for cancer patients who are undergoing hyperbaric therapy, I usually put them on a ketogenic diet, right? Because ketogenic diet is very antioxidizing. And when they're that, then you pulse them now with a high pressure oxygen, and then that's when it exerts its anti-cancer effect. So these things are studied. It's actually, they're published. We know the protocols for them. But in the end, what you're looking at there is you're actually creating metabolic balancing in there. So we are in the metabolic balancing act business here, right? Before the damage occurs, let's keep ourselves healthy.
Absolutely. So, yeah. Ted, I just want to, I'm summarizing quickly. Now we've got health optimization, medicine and practice, where we've got the essential course. So there's the 7 pillars. We also have the advanced modules. So there's 2 advanced modules at this point, and we've got another one on its way shortly.
Yes.
That we'll be working on soon. Yes. And we also have the mini modules associated with the essential course. So that's a little snippet of some of those, the main pillars that we've got there, and also the advanced modules. So give me a little bit of a summary about the mini modules so people know and aware of that coming out. And then I want to dive into transcriptions and the additional in that aspect.
Perfect.
We haven't covered that yet.
Yes. We developed, Jodi is actually part of this. We developed the 7 pillars course, right? And the first course that's required, of course, is clinical metabolomics. It's a foundation of all the other courses. In fact, after you finish that, you can actually apply to practice just clinical metabolomics alone, not health optimization medicine or health optimization practice, right? Where you actually have to submit cases, for review. But of course, how do we entice you to work on modules that are anywhere from 6, 8, or 12 weeks long, right? So we developed the mini modules, which are actually free. And by the way, all of these regular modules, you can have what's called Home Hope track module, meaning you're on track to become a practitioner. And you could also audit any course, meaning you don't need to take any final exams. But both of those will have continuing medical education credits. So, and you will be surprised, come and visit us there, because you will be surprised that how big the number of credits are. And Jodi will attest to this. It is a labor of love. We did this on our own time, and also a love of labor. There's a lot of
and
for this
sucker for knowledge.
For the special modules, it was actually I was the one who was pushing Jodi, and she did a fantastic job on our cannabinoids for health optimization. So if you want to know how to use cannabinoids for health optimization, there is an advanced module for that. There's also the big thing now is using peptides, right? So if you want to use peptides for health optimization, it's also an advanced module. Jodi has been forever kicking me to put forth in the world my really simple way of doing hormone balancing, right, for health optimization. It's gonna come soon, I promise. It's just that all Jodi is one of my bosses that actually like, do this first. But anyway, and I'm happy. But anyway, so how do we get people to experience these modules, get a gist of what they are? So we created mini modules. They're free, right? You can go to the site. You could have access to them. They also have continuing medical education credits. Some as high as 1.75, some as low as 0.75. But probably averaging around 1.5 credits for all of these 7 modules. Again,
also across the world. So in Australia, we can get those. I'm not sure about Europe. Do you know about Europe? Ted?
Not yet. But I know also that there's an equivalence for the CME of the United States to CME in Europe.
But Australia's equivalent, pretty much.
Yeah, it's by the number of hours, right? And don't get fooled. I know it says our mini module says in 10 slides or less, but I'll give you a secret. Jodi's is 20. So
my students.
That's why she has one of the higher CME credits available out there. We had fun doing it. We got the core information from the course to give you a flavor. We call them modules, and the entire set of modules will form the course. These are mini modules, right, to give you a flavor of all those. They're free. They're available. You can also get CME credits for them. So that's the and even the advanced modules also have mini modules. So that's the story of the mini modules right now, and they're hot off our laptops. So
just been released. But what I want to really drive home here, Ted, is that this health optimization medicine practice is a specialty on its own. It's something that no one's ever seen before. And this is what excited me so much when I discovered you and found you, that I couldn't believe that this was going to be all in one place. Something that I was so true to my heart of this cellular health and cellular foundational, health and bringing people back into that balance was out there in a course in a place that we could actually call health optimization medicine practice. And it's perfect. It's really perfect that we can practice in this way and share it this way. And we're all ready to shout it from the rooftops. So everyone else should.
Thank you. For those people thinking that we're very new, no, sweethearts, we're about 13 or 14 years old already. So we've been around. We've been the framework has been refined. The message has been simplified, so it's easier for people to get it. But remember, guys, this is highly experiential, right? And it requires some patience on your part, because your body didn't get to this state overnight. So it will take us a while. And what I want to say here is this. Okay, so we have health optimization, and it's a specialty of its own, right? And then, however, when your patient or client comes to you, the patient can have, anxiety, which needs to be relieved right away. The patient can have, or your client um, can be sleepless, right? So patient having anxiousness, patient having sleeplessness, patient having pain, right? So what I did was I actually formed a company, but because, as you know, Health Optimization Medicine and Practice is a charitable organization, right? So everything that we use there is donated lectures, donated time. Our services there are freely provided. We don't get paid for it. We are actually if you wish to contribute to us, there's a donate button right there. You can donate to us. You can also do it in other ways by telling other people about us, that this health optimization actually is a specialty, exists, and is a pretty cool framework, to get yourself healthy, get yourself or train yourself in health optimization as a practitioner. So that is an educational mission, as I said, and in order to fund this, I had to create a for-profit company, and that's called Smarter Not Harder, which is exactly what we do in health optimization, right? We don't do everything, we don't do anything hard. We just do everything smartly. We don't guess, we test, right? And isn't that smart of us? So what I decided was, we would be producing products that can be used by practitioners as well. Right? So and those are the products that are coming in. We just released the anti-anxiousness product, right? Which is called TroCalm, because it's prescriptions. It's like prescriptions, but it's a troche format. You guys know what a troche is, right? And so it's called prescriptions, and we just released as our third product, actually, TroCalm, and it has ingredients that actually target the same receptor as Valium does. Okay, so but it's a natural product. So these things exist, without the side effects that you could get from Valium and so on. The upcoming clinical products, of course, are those for sleep and sleeplessness and for pain. But before that, I actually had a lot of fun because I was Dr. Jetlag, right? I
Too many
I
countries.
had all sorts of injections all over my body that my practice manager in Manila, who also happens to be my nephew, said, they were my patients were asking, what's Dr. Ted's hobby? And he said embroidery. He likes to embroider his skin with needles.
Body embroidery.
Body embroidery. So I created something for myself, and because when I landed, I had to be on right away, and I would travel from the United States to Manila, for example, and the next day I would be in practice already, right? Because patients have been waiting for me for 3 months, before I returned there. So, and in order to be on, I took a look. I said, what can give my brain a boost? I know I'm going to be jet lagged, and how do I function without actually having brain lapses, or as they call in old people, brain farts, right? So I put together a product called Blue Carnitine, right? It's strobe blue carnitine, and it's, the way I explain it is it gives me what's called wide focus. Wide focus means that I'm lecturing, right? And I am aware of what I'm presenting, but I'm also aware of what my students or my audience is responding to and not responding to, and I can adjust my my presentation accordingly. Yeah. So imagine doing that when you're jet lagged, right? It has methylene blue. It's all in the name. Blue, Ka is for caffeine. Na is for the cannabidiol, right? Or CBD. Teen is nicotine, right? It is about nicotine, as you know, is a very is a potent releaser of acetylcholine, and acetylcholine is actually excellent for short-term memory work, right? So, and I really just made it for myself, right? I made it for myself. I made it as a gum, right, for myself, and my friends liked it, and they said, why don't we have this manufactured? And I went and I tried to get it manufactured, and they said, hey, we're confectioners. We can do this, but we won't do this for you because it turns all of our equipment blue. So I had to reformulate and created a troche instead, and that's why you put it between the upper cheek and gum, so it's closer to the basal circulation of the brain, right? So it's a faster, effective way. And then driven by the customers themselves. There was a request, a very strong request, to just put in pure methylene blue, right? And for methylene blue, I describe it as a bright focus. It's just like, it's very subtle, but you feel a certain brightness to the way you view things. And and that's what I use it for. If I'm not jet lagged, then what I do is I use Just Blue is the name of the product, right? And it's also there, but that was actually customer driven. Now we use pharmaceutical grade ingredients, meaning the ingredients that we use are not analytical grade, meaning that the one that you use in the lab. But if you, for example, as you know, methylene blue is used for carbon monoxide poisoning, right? But those are in ampoules, those are diluted, those come in a drip, an IV, and so on. So that's pharmaceutical grade, right? And that's what we use, right? Even if ours is oral, we're using pharmaceutical grade. So it's actually very funny when you see this, fish tank cleaner, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, like someone like me who's trained in pharmacology would allow that to happen. I treat all of our products, even if they are not drugs, I treat them as drugs, right? Where they have child-proof packaging, right? They have the appropriate, if you scan, as I require you to, you have to scan the QR code, and the insert looks like a drug insert, even if you're not required to do so, right? And I'm very particular with dosing, right? For example, we're precision dose, meaning if we say you're getting 1 milligram of nicotine per troche, if you have it analyzed, you really get 1 milligram. Yeah. So, again, we're good with, the 3 Ps, pharmaceutical grade, physician formulated, precision dose. And that's what we keep, that's why I keep as my motto when I formulate this stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are the current products that are products coming, and we may do one-off products just because I love medicinal plants, and I discover all sorts of things that I can do with them, right? And one of the things we're seriously putting out there is a product called TroBuild, something that will raise your free testosterone levels. It can also be used for hormone management if you want, but bodybuilders may want to use it, etc. Just because that's going to be the effect on humans, right? So this is how I find my fun. This is orgasmic for me. So
it's ever expanding. There is so much more. I can feel it. There's so much more.
Yeah. I know that. I know when you're saying so much more, you're goading me to say something else. So one of the questions that has been asked of me that's really struck me is I was asked by a psychiatrist who attended one of my presentations, and he asked me, so how do you include spirituality in health optimization, right? It also needs to be optimized. So if you guys are in the psychedelic space, you know that dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, the active molecule in ayahuasca ceremonies, right? It's known as the spirit molecule, So I've labeled lack of spirituality as simply the DMT deficiency syndrome. So
I use that all the time now. I'm like, oh. You can't unsee it. Once you see it in people, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, there are many studies now that are out there. For example, people are now aware that the default mode network of the brain, which is a network towards the midline structures of your brain, has been found to be the seat of the ego or the self-referential system, right? So we also just published, I think last year, would be the seat of spirituality has been found to be in the periacrodactyl brain of the brain, and what it has is a lot of opiate receptors, right? So spirituality gets you high. So it's a lot of, and pain management experts know this, that periacrodactyl brain is actually rich in opiate receptors, and they did a study, and it's now considered the seat of spirituality. So we are slowly discovering these things about ourselves. And so one of my main interests is really psychedelics, but in the context of what's called neural plasticity, right? How can we regrow certain connections of the brain, and those compounds that grow connections in the brain or grow new neurons, for example, they're called psychoplastogens, meaning they increase the plasticity, right? For example, they have shown, like, for example, microdoses of LSD, right? 10 micrograms daily, or twice a week, they actually regrow the dendritic connections of the brain. So what I encourage people really is get yourself health optimized first, because part of health optimization is neurotransmitter optimization. Like, for example, if you lack vitamin B6, right, you cannot create much of serotonin in your brain, right? And for example, a person saying, or a child is saying that I'm depressed, etc., we immediately give the child antidepressants, right? But if you check the vitamin B6 levels, probably it's really extremely low, right? So you see that these are the kinds of things that we fail to look at because we don't look at the network, right? And then you could also have a fair idea of how inflamed the brain cells are. There's an acid called quinolinic acid, which you could take a look at the value of. So in the process of health optimization, right, part of it is actually neurotransmitter optimization, at least the major neurotransmitters. The way this hit me home is, just recently, it's a follow-up of a case and that I had, and this is cocaine addiction, right? And the news is that, well, he's okay, he's all right, right? But I received an urgent message from a sister that I think he's relapsed, etc., etc. And then I heard no more, right? And so I took a look at his metabolites this time, and you could see a very, very low dopamine metabolite, like homovanillic acid, which is affected by cocaine, right? Cocaine can raise your dopamine, if I'm not mistaken, by as much as 4,000x. So, and what that does is that it uses up your dopamine. Not only does it use up your dopamine, right? The receptors for dopamine also decrease in number. There's an attrition, right? Because you say, oh, okay, this is too much, and you could catch it, and you could see, oh, there was indeed a relapse, right? And now you have to supply external dopamine, not levodopa, but you can supply something like bucconaprurians to get it right back up, at levels where he could focus again. Or if you have athletes, for example, that can't seem to focus, they're training, but they're very unfocused, and you take a look at neurotransmitter levels, you look at their dopamine levels for focus, dopamine is usually for focusing, and reward, it's also the neurotransmitter that's heavily implicated, the most implicated in addiction, is the dopamine levels of these athletes that are able to focus are very low. So so you have this level of health optimization first. There can be no true brain health optimization without first health optimization, because health optimization is all the cells in the body, right? Vitamin B6, for example, that's responsible for the synthesis of serotonin, is not only used by the brain, it's used by all the cells in your body, right? It's used by all cells in the body. So why just use it for the brain itself? Use it to optimize all parts of your body, right? And then after that, you can consider, okay, you consider psychedelics, psychoplastogens. How do I grow more neural connections? Ketamine, as you know, is now used as approved as an antidepressant, right? What does it do? It's actually what's called an NMDA receptor blocker. But in short, it basically gives you a reset of the DMN. It turns off your default mode network quickly and then turns it right back on, right? And they found out that within I think it is like 6 or 7 to 24 hours. They have found, this is in humans, they've found that the cells, the nerve cells are growing dendrites, or they're growing increased connections, right? That's why you want to do psychotherapy the day after, while they're still within the 24-hour period. Yeah, it's 7 to 24 hours. So while they're still within the 24-hour period, you do the psychotherapy so that those connections are actually guided in terms of their connections. And remember, it's not just about the number of connections, because connections ultimately have to be pruned to their proper network structure, right? They have to be pruned to their proper network structure. So you could see all of these things that can be used to actually optimize brain connections, right? You can use psychedelic psychoplastogens to optimize brain plasticity. It's not just for spiritual stuff, right? It's for optimizing the connectivity in the brain. So that's my main interest there, is how can we actually utilize these particular agents that have been used for centuries, or have been known to do these things with a very high safety margin, right? And remember, most people think that psychedelics are actually addicting. Actually, no way. DMT is an addicting. Psilocybin or magic mushrooms are not addicting. In fact, you take them with trepidation, right?
Yes, exactly. You're like, oh, okay, what am I going to learn today?
The things that are addicting are the amphetamines, Ritalin, for example, all right, or methylphenidate. These are the things that are addicting, because they go through your phenethylamine pathway, right? And they actually are amphetamines. So when you take a look at this particular tryptamines that you're using, right? The classic psychedelics, for example, are mostly tryptamines, right? They what they do is they actually flood your brain with serotonin, and in fact, thereby, or actually decrease the blood flow to your default mode network, thereby inducing downgrading the activity of that network. And when it comes back online, then it induces antidepressant. There's a more feeling of well-being, and so on and so forth. But my interest in it is, how do you use it, right, to increase brain connectivity? And now all the studies are coming up. So one of the advanced modules, which Jodi also has been kicking me to do, is the use of psychedelics for brain health optimization. Those things will be coming. She just has to elasticize my bandwidth a little bit more. But this is the fun of health optimization. You could use all of these, for like cannabinoids for brain health optimization. Jodi is an expert of that. Psychedelics for brain health optimization, psychedelics for health optimization, right? So all of these things, we don't use them for disease, and that's the thing that's wrong in terms of the regulation of things. We want to regulate them because we want to use them right away for disease. No, actually, no. We want to use them first for health optimization, right? And then if you find something works for disease, then fine, it works for disease. But the doses for those will be different. We use very, very small doses for these.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Oh, it's incredible, Ted. Now, I think I don't want to take up any more of your time. So before we finish, and
Yes.
this has been one of my favorite podcasts because we've covered so much. I love talking about this. I think it's just going to be fantastic to get it out to people to actually fully understand and run through step by step what health optimization medicine and practice is. So I'd
You
love.
mean me running my mouth off?
No, we stayed on track, Ted. We did really well today. But let's just run through where people will find health optimization medicine and practice and transcriptions. So I'll get you to tell everyone that.
Yes, the transcriptions is at transcriptions.com, and that's TRO, like prescription, but with the TRO, transcriptions.com. And visit us there. You'll see, how we actually present our products, because they're very drug-like. We keep it that way. We protect the public, protect the consumer as much as we can with packaging information and questions that are answered. Just as a caveat, we don't answer trolls. To use, as I said, to use our products, you have to have a modicum of interest in exactly what you want to achieve with what we're offering, right? Remember, we're not for diseases at all. We are for health optimization, right? And then health optimization medicine and practice is home, as in your home, hope, one word, homehope.org. And you will see there, ways to actually enroll in the actual clinical metabolomics module if this podcast has convinced you to do so, or check us out with our mini modules, which are also there. They're linked to there, and you could have access to them. And again, as I like to explain it, basically transcriptions and HOMeHOPe are yin and yang. HOMeHOPE is our yin, it's feminine, it's charity, it's nurturing, it's educating. And Smarter Not Harder, which produces transcription, is our yang. Balance is the one that is, when you buy products for us, a huge amount of your of what you of the price is actually donated to homehope.org. And so that's the one that it's a wheel that turns, because one is providing resources to the other, and the other is providing what the needs are to the other. And I'm presenting this is our what's called our reciprocity model, right? We just don't take money for profit, but we put the money back into charity. And I wish people would think of their businesses that way, right? If you have a business that's making money, think about how you could also move that money around into some charity or charitable contribution. And maybe the charitable contribution can be us. So
making the world a better, healthier place.
Yes. And more charitable place too.
And more charitable, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ted. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Always makes my day. I love chatting all the time. So thank you so much for coming on here and talking to us about all of your creations.
Thank you. Thank you, Jodi.
And thank you so much for what you do. I don't think we thank you enough.
Oh, I just want to have the last word here. The only reason why I agreed to take this podcast with Jodi is because I want to see her in long sleeves in Australia, and I am actually in short sleeves here in the United States. So really, really, that's the only reason why I took this. It's like just for the sheer pleasure of getting back at her for showing us her sleeveless attire when it was fucking winter here and it was so cold. So
no, now we're getting colder. I'm getting sad. Need some more of my psychedelics to come in now.
I can take care of that. Oops. Anyway.
Dr. Ted, thank you so much. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.